You know what's fascinating about modern society? We're living in what ancient religious texts would call Babylon, a world where the average person sees over 5,000 advertisements per day, all competing for our attention and devotion.
That's such an interesting parallel to draw. The way these ancient texts describe systems of control and manipulation feels surprisingly relevant today.
Well, looking at Revelation chapter 17 specifically, it uses this powerful imagery of a great prostitute dressed in luxury to represent these seductive systems. When you consider that global advertising spending hit $780 billion last year, you can really see how that metaphor holds up.
Hmm. And the text specifically mentions this woman being drunk with the blood of saints. How do you interpret that in our modern context?
I think it speaks to how these systems often profit from exploitation, like fast fashion companies that rely on what amounts to modern slavery, all while presenting a glamorous facade to consumers.
That's exactly what struck me too. This contrast between the outward beauty and the hidden corruption.
And let's talk about this scarlet beast she rides, described with 7 heads and 10 horns. It's fascinating how this represents complete systems of power, political, economic, and cultural. When you look at how just 5 media companies control 90% of what Americans consume, you start to see these power structures at work.
Well, that's a sobering statistic. The concentration of power seems to be accelerating, doesn't it?
Absolutely right. And what's really interesting is how the text predicts these alliances will eventually turn on each other. We've seen this play out repeatedly in history, like how the tech giants who once collaborated are now in fierce competition.
The psychological manipulation involved is really quite sophisticated, isn't it? Studies show the average person spends over 7 hours per day consuming digital media.
That's, that's exactly what the text warns about when it talks about being intoxicated. These aren't just passive activities, they're reshaping our neural pathways. Recent research shows social media triggers the same dopamine responses as addictive substances.
So, what do you think this means for future generations who are growing up completely immersed in these systems?
That's where I think the text's emphasis on community becomes crucial. Studies show that strong social connections can reduce the negative effects of digital addiction by up to 40%. But here's the catch: those connections need to be genuine, face to face interactions.
The need for authentic community seems more important than ever in our increasingly virtual world.
And that brings us to what I think is the text's most powerful insight: this idea that these systems aren't just external forces, but they actually shape our internal desires and values. Recent psychological studies show that excessive exposure to luxury advertising can actually alter our core value systems within just 6 months.
That's fascinating how modern research is validating these ancient warnings.
Well, and here's what really gets me: the text isn't calling for complete withdrawal from society. Instead, it's about maintaining awareness and intentionality. Like how studies show that just 30 minutes of daily mindfulness practice can significantly reduce susceptibility to manipulative messaging.
The practical application really matters here, finding that balance between engagement and resistance.
Exactly, and looking toward the future, I think we're going to see these tensions intensify. With the rise of AI and virtual reality, the ability to create compelling alternate realities is only going to increase. The text's warning about discernment becomes even more crucial.
That's such an important point about the future implications. How do we maintain our humanity in an increasingly artificial world?
Well, I think that's where the hope in the text becomes so relevant. Despite all these challenges, it promises that truth and authentic connection will ultimately prevail. And we're actually seeing some evidence of this. Studies show younger generations are increasingly seeking out authentic experiences and meaningful relationships over material consumption.
That's encouraging to hear, that even as these systems become more sophisticated, people are developing greater awareness and resistance.
And perhaps that's the most important takeaway for us today: that while these challenges are real and significant, we're not helpless against them. By understanding these patterns and staying connected to authentic community, we can navigate this modern Babylon while maintaining our integrity and humanity.